Hey guys, I'm Elliot. This is Everything Elliot, and we're going to be going over the Marty's Diesel e-fuel kit in this video. Now this video is going to be very lengthy, so what I've done for you is on the bottom, in the little scroll thing down here, there's chapters. So if you need a specific part of this kit install, just go to the specific chapter. They'll all be labeled at the bottom. You'll be able to watch the part that you want. Now if you're here because you're dedicated and you're going to watch the whole thing, I commend you, because it is going to be lengthy. I can tell you that much for free. Now before we get started, I got a couple things I want to go over with you, and I've got them written down. There are a couple specific things about this kit that you should know before we jump into it. Some would say that might set this kit apart from some other kits. The fuel lines that you're going to get with this kit, I mean, you get like 20 something feet, probably even more. I didn't measure it because it was so much. You're gonna get more fuel line than you'll ever need. You're gonna be cutting it off. You're gonna have spare fuel for any other project you want. There are just a ton of cottonwoods flying around in here. A little fuzzy, so don't worry about that. A lot of the fuel lines that have the quick connects on them, they're gonna be specific to Marty's, and you cannot get them local. So don't screw them up, because then you're gonna have to make an embarrassing phone call to Marty's and say, hey, I need you to send me some more of those jump size quick connects. So don't screw that up. Marty's also is gonna send you out some front of headlines. You'll see in the video that I don't use them because my front of headlines are in really good shape. The motor that is in this truck is not the original motor and was replaced about 2 years ago. So you'll see a lot of the stuff like the front of headlines and the rear of headline O-rings I don't need in my truck because, well, they're only about 2 years old. They're in really good shape. But Marty's will send you front of headlines for you to put in your truck. They also include a regulator bracket now. I don't know, maybe like a year ago, they didn't have a regulator bracket. You just kind of slap the regulator in there. It worked, but it wasn't great. Marty's has now made a regulator bracket that uses factory holes in your block to mount the regulator to. You're gonna see me install that a little bit later in the video. Now, one of the biggest things that you're gonna get with this kit is gonna be the fuel pump replacement block. A lot of other companies are just using a hodgepodge of fittings to get you from your Banjo Bolt down to the fuel line. Marty's actually has a milled replacement block that your Banjo Bolt goes right into, and on the other side hooks your fuel line right up to it. I mean, it literally does not get easier than that. Well, it's not one connection, it's two, because your Banjo Bolt is one and your fuel line connection is number two. 2 connections on the fuel side, 3 connections on the regulator side. Also a nice thing that comes with this kit is what they label the bag of extras. I mean, you literally just get a sandwich bag full of parts, fittings, nuts, bolts, stuff that you're gonna drop and you're gonna say, man, I wish I got another one of those with this kit. Marty's thought of that. They sent them out. Bag of extras, super helpful. I was responsible, didn't need anything out of the extra bag, so does that make me better than you? I don't know. When you do this kit, I guess you'll find out. Now the wiring is much like the hose situation. You're gonna get so much wire, you're not gonna know what to do with it. And again, that's because they make this kit for every body style truck. If you've got an extended cab long bed, if you've got a crew cab long bed, you've got a single cab short bed, they give you the maximum amount of wire to do the longest truck possible, which would be the crew cab long bed. So if you've got a truck like mine, you're gonna have a lot left over. It looks a little daunting when you go down Rapid. You see, man, I got like 23 miles of wire to wire in this thing. But in reality, it's just a lot of extra because they don't want to make specific kits for specific body style trucks. Probably quicker on their end, and I mean, the loss for them is probably very minimal. Going along with the electrical is going to be some conduit. Wire loom, conduit, call it what you want. Make sure you wrap all your wire in that conduit. You start rubbing wires, you're going to short out. You're gonna have problems, you're gonna blame Marty's, but in reality you have nobody to blame but yourself. They give it to you, use it. There's no sense in not using it. Now here's a big thing that I ordered with my kit. It's called the pre-pump solution kit. Basically, with ordering the pre-pump solution kit, you are putting in a fuel system brand new from the rear tank, mid tank, all the way up to the engine. Pre-pump solution kit includes the little foot, the pickup foot that goes in your tank, all new hoses, everything. Because what generally happens is people install this, they use their old lines, there's a little bit of schmutz in there, a little bit of dirt, a little bit of whatever's in there, and it clogs it up. It doesn't get the proper flow. That's why they include a vacuum gauge that you're supposed to install on the suction side of the pump. Now they give you the readings that you're supposed to have, and people usually blame the pump, but in reality it's clogged lines, clogged pickup foot. So if you have an older truck, you don't know the status of the tank, the interior of the tank, it might be a good idea for you to get the pre-pump solution kit with the fuel system. I mean, you're already buying, you might as well save on shipping. I mentioned the vacuum gauge. That comes with the kit. You want to install that temporarily. Once you get everything up and running, you can go ahead and remove that. Again, that goes on the suction side of the kit. Speaking of gauges, it also comes with a fuel pressure gauge. Again, that goes on the regulator, helps you set your fuel pressure. You can go ahead and leave that one in if you want to. I mean, you could leave the vacuum one in if you wanted to as well, but there's really no point. It's just one more thing to go wrong. Hit it with a rock and break it. So you might as well take it out. So you might see behind me here in the lower part of the truck, I actually already have this kit done, and I've had it done for about 150 miles. That's because I wanted to make sure everything was a-okay before I actually recorded this intro. Now you're gonna see the start of the actual video, the installation, and all that good stuff. If you know somebody interested in it, make sure you share this video with them. Don't forget to subscribe, and I appreciate you guys sticking around. So do you have a 7.3 Powerstroke, kind of like the one that's behind me, or even like a 90, what are they, 99, 98 to 03 maybe? The newer body style. The problem with these Powerstrokes is they got the fuel bowl in the valley, and that fuel bowl can cause a lot of trouble for you. It can cause some fuel leaks. So I've got a solution to that. And it happens to be in this box right here. This is a Marty's e-fuel kit. You've probably heard a lot of people talking about e-fuel for these trucks. This is by Marty's. We're gonna open it up and see what comes in the box. We'll go through everything, show you where everything goes, how it fits together. I know the company takes great pride in their products, so I'm sure this is packaged pretty well. So box inside of a box, we will get rid of the big box and we'll go on to the smaller box. All right, let's open up the small box and see what we got inside here. Oh, lots of good stuff. All right, so it looks like we got a bunch of hoses here. Looks like my fuel filters are pre-installed on the pump. Got the fuel regulator in this box here. Put that aside. All right, let's get it all out of the box and set it out on the bench here. All right, so everything is out of the box, and it seems like we got a lot of hose, and not the kind of hose you'd find on a street corner late at night. I'm talking about rubber hose that's gonna transport fuel for you. Got some papers, probably won't read those. So let's start with the simple stuff. Fuel regulators right here. It's made by Fuel Lab. Comes in a nice box. We'll put that together a little later. Fuel PSI gauge that goes on the regulator right here. Since that goes with the regulator, we'll set it with that. What do we got? We got a bunch of stuff wrapped up together here. Got some sort of tool here. Nipex. I don't know what tool they would send me. Oh, okay. So these are for crimping your fuel lines. I mean, this has got to be a $40 tool, I would assume. Nipex is a Nipex, whatever you want to call it, is a pretty name brand company. So that's nice. The tool is included. Excuse me, Theodore. I'm trying to do something here. So yeah, this is the IPR pigtail, so you don't need to make your own. You don't need to do your own. That was a nice little addition that they offer. A whole wiring harness for it. This relays, powers the pump. Everything you need is included right here. We'll set that aside for now. This little kit here, this is going to be your fuel regulator mounting bracket. So your regulator is not just floating around in your valley. This will mount down using a factory mounting point and then get your regulator nice and stout. Easy access. Great to have this. Next thing we have here is some, looks to be fuel pickups. So this is the reason I took the bed of my truck off. I want to get the top of the fuel tank, the fuel sending unit out, because I want to put new pickups in there just to avoid any issues I have with the old pickups, so you can get new ones right from Marty's. It is a Ford part, genuine Ford. You pay a little extra for them, but it's worth paying the extra for the new pickup rather than burning out your pump when you're not getting the proper suction. Bunch of fittings, bunch of fittings. Set all these fittings aside. More fittings. And the reason that these come just in a pack and not on the hose already is because you have to cut the hose. Marty at Marty's Diesel makes these kits for every cab and bed configuration. So he sends, I mean, there's gotta be like 20 foot of hose here. Another probably 15, 20 foot of hose here. And then, I don't know, 5, 10 feet of, probably 5 feet of hose here. Not to mention about like 20 foot of wire loom. So we've got everything apart, everything's out. Let's discuss how it goes together. It's a pretty simple procedure, I guess you want to say. Pretty simple installation. You've obviously here got your 2 filters. This is going to be your water separator filter and your regular fuel filter right here. You know this is the water separator because it's got the water drain valve right there. I opted for cat, but they offer a bunch of different types of filters. I just wanted the nice yellow looking filters. I think they look cool into the truck. So your pump is in between the 2 filters and it comes with the wiring already attached to it. You can see here they pre-attach the wiring on this pump because I assume these are pretty easy to break. So this wiring is going to go up and connect into this wiring group here. You can see he's already got the connection points in here. You just have to take it and crimp your connection points. This side of this is going to go to the battery. The reason that this is already connected, so you can't screw it up, and there's actually a resettable breaker in here. So moving forward, we're gonna pretend that this is on the truck and I'm gonna show you basically how this gets hooked up. Now you've got your fuel selector valve. This is an old one, I just had to replace it. Figured I'd hang on to it for this video. For you watching, this way is going to be the back of the truck. This way is going to be the front of the truck. So naturally, you're gonna have your fuel selector valve is going to be back here, something like that. You have your short hose. Your short hose that comes with it is going to go from your fuel selector valve to the back side of this filter housing. So forward of it, you've got this nice long hose here. That's gonna be your return line. So that, I don't know, we'll put it here. There's just a lot of hose, man. You just got, it's just a lot of hose. Trying to figure out what goes to where is something, huh? Okay, I think I got it figured out here. So there's a lot of hose, and I think that the reason I have so much extra hose is because I got the pre-pump solution with it. So you've got these 2 pickups here, and you've got 2 new lines here. This has got to be for the pre-pump solutions. So we'll set these aside. If you didn't get the pre-pump solution, you probably won't get this hose. And your super long length of hose, this is going to be your feed and return line. Now this runs up to the engine bay. This is where you would connect your fuel regulator into. So your fuel regulator would go up here, and that's basically it. I mean, it doesn't get much simpler than that. And now that I've got everything apart, we'll be able to install it in the truck. These 2 right here are going to be replacement fuel lines. These go to each head. So the next thing we can do is get it installed. So I've got everything out of the box. I got some hoses on the floor. Those hoses that are just kind of a mess right now because my cat knocked them off from up here. Here's the 4th one. So we got all 4. These are the pre-pump solution kit. So if you didn't order the pre-pump solution kit, you're not gonna get these 4 hoses. Now, if you have a single cab, long bed, 4-wheel drive truck, you're not gonna have anywhere to mount this. You actually have to take the mounts off the filters. So how this is supposed to be mounted is like this. 4 bolts on the bottom go through the bottom of the frame, and then the filters are supposed to come off here and then go down. Well, that didn't work for me. There's nowhere really for me to bolt it on. So what I did was I took these off that would have normally gone here, and then the filter hangs down. Well, it probably went like this, and then the filter hang down right here. I took those off. I went and got some new stainless steel hardware from the hardware store, and now I'll be able to mount it right to the side of the frame through these holes here. So it'll sit like this. The Marty's diesel will be backwards. I guess if they have a mirror or something, you'll be able to see it, but new hardware, all stainless steel, just because everything else that was included in the kit was stainless steel. I wanted it to match it. So I've got that ready to go in, and I've got the fuel bowl already out of the truck. Now, if you don't know how to take the fuel bowl out of the truck, I'll put a link up in the top. I have a previous video where I had to take this fuel bowl out. I went into detail on how to take the fuel bowl out. I'll link that up top right now. Coming to the back of the truck, now this is going to be part of the pre-pump solutions kit. You actually have to take your sending unit out, and you have to put your new pickup in here. Now this one is my old pickup. It is still pretty clean, but since I got the kit, I might as well put the pickup in. That one is super easy. You just throw a wrench on it, unspin it. This one was a little more difficult. I had to get my air hammer out and hammer that locking ring off. So now it should be loose, so I can take that off and replace the pickup. These lines here that are currently off, 1, 2, 3, 4, those lines going to the selector valve. They run inside the frame here, and they go to the selector valve, which is right here. Those are these lines right here. Here's my new pickup, so I'm gonna go do that. It's pretty simple. You'll just pull that sending unit out and then put this on here. It's not held on by anything. It's just a rubber tight fit. So I'm gonna get that done, and we'll move on with this project. So we are ready to put in the rest of the fuel lines now. I'm gonna start from the rear of the truck. These are gonna be the new fuel lines that came with the pre-pump solution kit. I got 4 of them. There's 2 long ones and 2 short ones. Obviously, it's pretty self-explanatory. The short ones go to the front tank and the long ones go to the rear tank. Since I already have the rear hoses disconnected, I'll probably just start with that. I'll put the truck in the air, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna do 1 line at a time. That way I don't get them swapped. Because these fittings are 2 different sizes, as you can see over there. And then the fitting on the selector valve are 2 different sizes. You wanna make sure that they match up. And since my hoses only have fittings on one side, we're gonna have to make sure they match so you're not sending fuel the wrong way. And some of it is hard line, so you are gonna have to pop these little retaining clips off and to get it out. So the pre-pump solution kit is all the way in. Again, like I was saying, you've got the new pickup foot on the bottom of your sending unit, and I've put in new lines now. So I got 2 here and then 2 going to the back. Now, it is very important that when you put these lines on, you have a very straight cut. You don't want to use dikes or something like that. You want to make sure you pick up one of these pipe cutters. That'll ensure that it cuts very straight. You're gonna need that for the other part when you have the push-on fittings as well. You wanna make sure you have a nice straight cut. There are 2 different size fittings here. The big one can obviously fit on the small one loosely, but the small one cannot fit on the big one. You just wanna be sure that you match the fitting from here to the selector valve. So what I did was I had the long end or the open end of the hose on this end, and then I slid the end that already has a fitting on it into the selector valve, hooked up that fitting, had the extra hose out here, cut it to the length I needed it, and then put these band clamps on. These band clamps come with the kit, and it actually comes with the tool that you need to squeeze them. You just squeeze them all the way shut. You see they got a nice good fit there, nice and tight. They're not coming off. So everything from the selector back is done. So you can see I've got the bracket mounted the way that I showed you guys on the bench. I had to drill 2 holes into the frame. Well, I should say this. I drilled 1 hole in the frame, and the back one there, that was actually an existing hole that I just had to make bigger. The bolts are not tight, that's why you see I got vice grips holding it up there. And these are stainless steel bolts with lock washers. They're gonna generate a ton of heat when you guys go to lock them down, and you might burn the nylon out of them. So it's very important that you take some sort of lubricant, ATF, something along those lines, and just spray that bolt before you tighten it down. It will save you a bunch of headaches, trust me. Once this is tightened down, you should never need to remove it, so make sure it's nice, good and tight, and should be ready to rock and roll. I will still be able to access the bolts up top if I ever need to take this filter housing down. I got cap head screws, which are Allen bolts. Again, like I said, all stainless, except for that bushing that I put in between. I had to put a bushing in there because the pump actually sits up higher than the top of that filter housing. So I had to put that little bushing in there. That is a chrome bushing because they didn't have any stainless ones. So tighten it down and then we'll move on. So it's time to get into that Banjo Bolt that is behind there. And it's tough to see, but it's right under that pedestal. There, maybe you can kind of see it there. But basically it's 1.25 inches. And what you have to do is get an open end wrench. If you have torches, it helps. If you don't, I guess just sit there with a propane, but 1.25 inches, go to the store, go to Harbor Freight, buy something cheap because you're gonna put a bend in it. You can see I heated this up and bent it about a 1/2 inch above where the wrench closed end of the combination wrench is. Just give it a slight bend. That way you'll be able to sneak it in and it won't hit the turbo pedestal. So I just did that. I gotta wait for it to cool down, and then we're gonna go ahead and take the Banjo Bolt out. So that's the Banjo Bolt. That is the 1.25 inches that we needed to take off the back of the fuel pump. Now it's time to take the fuel pump out. It's pretty simple. There's only two 10mm bolts, which I already took out. There's one right there and one right there. Just throw your socket on it, take them out. And what you're gonna wanna do is take your dead blow hammer and just give this a couple taps. I'm not saying crank on it, just give it a little couple lub taps to separate it. And you can see right here, it might be tough because it's kind of far away, but there's actually a gap. So right there, again, sorry, it's tough to see, but there is a gap. There you go, now you might be able to see it. And that means that this fuel pump, it actually popped up when I tapped it. That's where you want it. You want it to start up. That means that your cam is up and the little, what do they call those? The thing that rides on the cam. I forget the name of it right now, but that means that that is up in the air, or I should say pointing directly up. If yours does not pop up, but it is loose, you know it's loose, you can spin it left and right, clockwise, counterclockwise. You know it's loose, it doesn't pop up. What you're gonna wanna do is hook your socket onto your alternator, spin your alternator, that'll rotate your engine, and then you'll see that pop up. Once it gets to its highest point, then you know you're good. So to get this out, what we're gonna be doing is, it's gonna pull straight up. It's gonna be nice and easy, but I'm actually gonna go grab a magnet, start to lift that up, and when I do, I'm gonna slide this magnet into that fuel pump, and that'll grab the, I can't think. So my apologies. Leave a comment below if you know the name. I'm sure by the time that this is posted, I'm gonna remember, but. Come on, tap it, baby. Slide this in there. That'll grab the little piston. That's what I'm gonna call it for right now, the little piston. And we'll lift that up with it so you don't accidentally drop it into your motor. I'm the only one here, so it's really tough to film, but once I get it out, I'll show you what I mean. So here is the fuel pump. Obviously we're looking at it this way when it's sitting in the truck. And this is what you don't wanna lose in your motor. Oh man, I'm spilling stuff all over the place. But this comes out super easy, just like that. And if that falls off in your motor, you're gonna have a bad time. So that's what you wanna hook with the magnet when you're pulling this up. And there is a little bit of a gasket here, this O-ring, so it's gonna be a little tough to pull up. So just keep working it back and forth until you get this is exposed, and then put the magnet right on that. So now you can get a pretty good idea of what I got going on in here. So that's where the fuel pump was. You can see that's where the Banjo Bolt goes. We need to put a freeze plug in here, otherwise we'll just have oil spewing everywhere. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get this all cleaned up, and then we'll get ready to install the freeze plug, which should have come in your extra bags. All right, so I've got the regulator in there. It's just sitting in there. I've got it mounted to the mounting brackets. The two jump size fittings go on each side, and then the 90 that hooks into the hose is on the bottom, right there. You see the yellow coupling there? That's what you want. On the side, you've got a nipple that's gonna be to atmosphere, and then you've got your gauge on top here. Simple as that. Hooks into the fuel bowl mounting points. And the next thing I need to do is get the new Banjo Bolt mounting bracket over there. So this is gonna be your Banjo Bolt mounting bracket, and it comes with 2 new washers. You wanna make sure that you use these. You don't wanna use the old ones. So this will go on either side of the Banjo Bolt. One will go on the back side, and then one will go on the front where it makes contact with this. I'll get that put together, and we'll show you what it looks like. You're gonna wanna install your new block that you can see right there, the silver piece. Basically, you put your new washers on your Banjo Bolt, and you thread your Banjo Bolt into that. I left it disconnected from the motor to get it started. That way it goes in nice and easy. And then when it was about halfway, I bolted that block down to the motor and then finished the Banjo Bolt. When you do install this new block, make sure you use a wrench on the front side. There's a nut right there. You can see it when my shadow goes away. That's gonna be a 1-inch. Put your 1-inch wrench on there, 1.25 inches on the Banjo Bolt. You wanna hold that front nut while you tighten your Banjo Bolt, otherwise you're gonna crack this at the support that's over here. You've got another fitting here that's on your block that'll also go to your flexible hose. And I've removed the factory supply and return lines. Those were sitting right here. There's one hold down bolt right about here, and then those lines go underneath your AC compressor, down the front of the motor, and then at the bottom, there's gonna be one more hold down. It's like right down here. If you're underneath the truck, you'll see it. You look at the fuel lines. I cut those and just pulled them out. And I've pulled out the lines all the way back to the selector valve. Here they are right here. Obviously your selector valve is right there, this connection. Just goes up the frame. It's held down by a couple plastic fittings, or plastic hold downs I should say. And then you can just see that I just broke it in a couple pieces to get it out. This section is the section that's on the front of the motor. It's got the most bends in it. It's the toughest to get out, and all you have to do is just cut it. It'll pretty much fall right out. What I need to do now is I need to work on the line from the selector valve to the pump. That's gonna be that little 4-foot section that you got. One end is gonna have a fitting on it for the selector valve, and the other end is gonna be open. That'll go right into that fitting right there. It's pretty simple. I'm gonna go from the selector valve over top of the frame into that fitting. I'll turn that fitting up. It's one little hose. I'm probably gonna have too much. Well, I'm gonna lift this thing in the air, and I'm gonna work on the pump to selector valve line now, which, if you haven't been paying attention, is this line right here. That'll go on the selector valve, and this open end will go on the pump end. So the truck's back on the ground, and I've got the hose hanging down there. That's going to be supply for the fuel. I didn't hook it up yet because I don't know exactly where I want to route it, and I want to get the return line from the engine bay back to the selector valve, so I can actually put the selector valve back in the frame, and then I can decide where I want to route that, which way the hose sits the best. So I took my long piece of hose that's over here, folded it in half. You can see that this has got a blue connection on it, and what I did is I left about an extra, 2 feet. Came back here, put a tape mark in the halfway point with that extra 2 feet being at the elbow, and then labeled the side with the elbow as R as return. That is going to be your return. That's important. You want to make sure you have the right hose. Basically now I'm gonna take those 2 ends and shove them down in the engine bay. I'm gonna use the factory routing, I hope, and which is somewhere right about there. So I'll just shove it down and then let the hose dangle on the ground, find what we need up here for hose, and get on our way. So we've now got the loop in the engine bay, there's the tape, and then the R for the return line. And everything's just shoved underneath. There's a whole pile of hose here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lift the truck back up, and I'm just gonna run that hose back down the frame and start zip tying it to where it needs to be. So you know how I had that big loop in there? I got it all strapped down under the frame, and I've actually cut the loop. End of the hose that has that 90 on it, the one that you marked return, it's got that 90 quick fit, that gets connected right there on the back side of your Banjo Bolt. This is probably a good time for me to stop you and tell you that I misspoke. when I was saying the return lines and everything like that, the return line actually goes on the regulator. I believe I said that it goes on the Banjo Bolt, so don't screw that up. Return line, regulator, R&R. Feed line goes to your Banjo Bolt, to the back of the head. And the way I routed that hose is I'm gonna put it underneath the regulator. That's why the regulator's back out of the truck, those 2 bolts there. That is now tightened down. So I'm gonna take those bolts out, get the regulator back in there. This end of the hose, the other half that you cut, this goes on that 90 that's on the regulator right here. Both of these are your front of headlines, and that's about it. So I'm gonna get the regulator back in there, get the front of headlines on it. My front of headlines are still in really good shape, so I'm gonna leave mine on there. And my back of headlines are also in good shape and don't leak, so I'm not putting the O-ring on there. I am going to save the O-ring. That way if they do start leaking one day, I can just zip them off, put the new O-ring on there. So now that we've got all the plumbing done for the fuel, it's time to move on to the electrical. Now this comes with 2 separate wiring harnesses. One that's on the pump, which you've probably seen, it's zip tied up to the pump, and then a separate one which I have right here. Now this one that was off the pump, I put it in some of this conduit that came with the kit and ran it all the way up here. So there is wire inside of here. You can see it. So this comes from the pump. This is your relay block. So you have a couple different wires on here. Basically how it's gonna go, your thick red wire is gonna be cut and loop right up to your circuit breaker. And then the other half of it is going to be connected to the other half of the circuit breaker and come to your battery. So once you've got this hooked up to the circuit breaker and the other half to your battery, then you've got this other red wire. That's gonna be your signal wire. This has got the fuse block end on it. Right here, that is gonna hook into your fuse box. That's right here. I'll show you that position in a little bit. Black is pretty self-explanatory. That's ground. I'm gonna run that right to the battery here. And then there's also another black that's in here that I'll run to the battery. The red that is in this, that comes from the pump, goes to your relay, the one that doesn't have a wire attached to it. In my case, it's this front one right here. I know it's tough to tell which one doesn't have one on it, but that's the one it goes to. Thick red wire, circuit breaker, then back to the battery. Thin red wire off the relay goes to your fuse box. Black wire goes to ground. In your conduit from the fuel pump, red wire goes to the empty port there. Black wire goes to ground. So I'm gonna get it wired up and we'll jump back when it's time to put it in the fuse block. All right, so everything is wired up the way it should be. I do not have it connected to the battery yet, but I just wanted to give you an idea of this fuse panel. So this is gonna be the fuse panel that's under your hood. We've got an add a fuse here. This comes with the kit. Basically, you take out the third fuse up. So remember that time I told you it was the third from the bottom? That's a complete lie. It's the third from the top. Third from the bottom is not switch. That is 12 volts all the time. Third from the top, 1, 2, 3. That is switch 12 volt power. 30 amp fuse. You put that in the bottom slot, in the slot that's already got a fuse in it. That'll be for the wires that we're putting in over here. So just take that add a fuse, slap it in the old third, number 3 position, and then just run your wire somewhere convenient like that. And you should be able to close the top. Perhaps no? Oh, I see. We got to trim this out a little bit. Okay. We'll just take some snips to this and trim this away. But other than that, I use the conduit to put the wires in. I'm gonna zip tie everything up. This runs up here. We drop our grounds. The power stays in because the ground is gonna be going here and the power is gonna run over to here. I picked up the ground from the fuel pump into this conduit and I dropped the power to the fuel pump right there. You can see I've got a zip tie holding it all together and that goes up in there. Obviously I haven't cut this off yet, but we're on our way. I'm gonna get this trimmed up, put it back on, and then we'll be ready to hook it to power, and then we gotta go back in the engine bay here, do the IPR plug, put it all back together, and it should run. So I've got the IPR shortened up and hooked back up. That's right here. Goes down to the IPR, that's right there. So everything should be done. I'm gonna turn the key on, see if I can read anything on this gauge. I don't know if it's gonna read or what, but we will also check the vacuum. I'll go turn the key on and we'll check the vacuum. All right, key's on. Pump is going. And we're reading about 4. Oh, and we got a leak. Reading about 4. Let's see what it says up here. Let's see if this gauge says anything. Nothing. Truck might have to be running to adjust this. I don't know. All right, we gotta fix that leak. Let's turn the key back off. So, put the Y pipe back on. Everything else should be hooked up. I tightened down that loose fitting. It really wasn't that loose, but I gave it another quarter spin. I guess we'll try to start it. I turned that regulator, I turned the bolt in. I don't know what it's going to read for pressure because it didn't give me a reading at all. So I guess we'll try to crank it over and see what happens.
I apologize if I've given you any false hope.
I mean, I just turned that screw in a couple times. Wouldn't think it'd be that easy, so let's go check the pressure. Reading 0 PSI. Yeah, reading 0 PSI. Huh. So right now I'm turning it out, loosening the Allen. We'll go try to start it again. This time I'm just gonna hop in the engine bay. I'm not gonna grab the camera because I wanna take a look at this gauge. It's kind of tough to grab the camera and run over here at the same time. So we'll see what happens. See if it starts again. I just heard Theodore come in the door. Theodore, you back from adventuring? All right, I turned it in now, and we'll try it again, I suppose. So I'm wondering if what it started on was the fuel left in the heads. So I'm gonna hook the battery tender up to it because the battery does sound like it's dying a little bit. And then I'll crank and crank and crank, and then when it starts, I'll be back with you. So it's been 2 days since I've finished installing this Marty Z fuel, and I'm having issues. I still can't get the truck to run. I've been doing a bunch of troubleshooting. Basically what it's led me to believe is that either the pump is bad, I mean, that's all it can be. Pump is bad. Basically the troubleshooting is I'm not getting any fuel out of the regulator on the return side. And the fuel regulator that's provided requires a minimum of 25 PSI to open and allow fuel to flow through the regulator. That means since I'm not getting any fuel out of the regulator to return back to the tank, that means I have less than 25 PSI of pressure, which it showed 0 pressure on the gauge. Now I have fuel, and just because I have fuel doesn't mean I have pressure. Well, I'd have to have some sort of pressure, but it could be very low. I could have like 2 or 3 PSI, 5 PSI, and it's just not reading on the gauge. What I did was I took that gauge off, turned my air compressor on to 40 PSI, and put the air nozzle onto the compressor to confirm that the gauge is working. The gauge is working properly. The gauge matched what the compressor had in the tank. So I put the regulator back in with the brass nipple on it. Because this has a minimum working pressure of 25 PSI, this truck will run on 25 PSI. Not well, but it'll run. So I can see the regulator, it's not actually in the truck. Well, it's hooked up, but it's not fastened down. And what I did was I came over to the pump. I took out the vacuum gauge because I was getting the proper vacuum over there, and I put it on this side, and I took the fuel pressure gauge from the regulator, put it on the pump, and it is not reading anything, which is not great. So I know the gauge works. I know I'm getting fuel, but it just must be low pressure. So The next step that I'm gonna do is make up a little line, hook that line onto that pump, and pump some diesel into the cleanest bucket I can find. Might be this one. I don't know if I have anything cleaner. Basically, I wanna see what kind of flow I'm getting out of this thing. I think it's about a gallon a minute is what we want. So I have a ton of spare hose left over. So I'm just gonna cut like a 3-foot section. I'll just throw one of the spare fittings on that came in the spare bag, put that fitting on the end of the fuel pump, and I'll run it into the bucket and we'll see what happens. All right, so here's the setup. That bucket was just to catch any fuel coming out, but I've got a spare hose hooked up. You can see it right to the end of the pump there, running down and into that conveniently measured out gallon of milk. Well, there's no milk in it. But what I'm gonna do is set a timer and run it for like a minute. See how many gallons per minute I'm getting, kind of thing. See how long it takes to fill up that gallon. And at $6.50 a gallon, you know that's going right back in the truck. I guess we'll just be back with the results in a minute. So the gallon milk jug is filled up. It's to the top there, kind of tough to tell. But yeah, I'm gonna go with bad fuel pump directly out of the gate, and I'll show you why. 3 minutes and 17 seconds it took to fill up that gallon. Now, that explains why we have flow up at the lines, because we do have flow. However, it's just taking so long, or I should say it's such a low rate that we're not getting enough PSI. So yeah, bad pump. And if you look on Marty's website, they say that it's very rare and they get a lot of people that complain, hey, it's a bad pump, it's a bad pump, it's a bad pump. I paid extra for the pre-pump solution kit to make sure that I didn't have any issue on the backside of the pump from the tank. So the pickup foot and the lines all the way up to the pump are new. I checked the pressure. I'm getting 5 inches of vacuum at the pump. So I know I have good vacuum and there's no obstructions. If you had an obstruction, you'd get a high number like 10, 13 inches of vacuum, but I only had 5, which is what they spec out. The only other thing I could think is a bad pump. That's about it. Needless to say, I'm a little disappointed. So, can you hear the defeat in my voice? It's super disappointing. Well, I did put the bed back on my truck. So you'll see that, because I got so frustrated I needed to switch topics. Put that back on there with the tractor, everything went smoothly, bolted it back down, no issues. So I'm gonna do some research, see what I can do to get a replacement pump and go from there. Theodore has found himself very comfortable in that pile of dirt. So it's been a couple days, and last you knew I had a bad pump. Been an interesting series of events. I actually called Marty's, did all the diagnostics that they told me to do. Turns out the pump was bad. So that one that's there is actually a new pump. Took the whole system down, replaced that pump, and I've got the old one on my messy bench over here. So that is the one I took out. That's the bad one. New one is in, so now I'm gonna set the truck down and then I guess we'll try to crank it. All right, so everything's hooked up. I have the regulator on the lowest setting, which should be about 25 PSI. The truck should run on 25 PSI, so I'm gonna go turn the key on and we'll see if this fires up. Baby. All right, I'm gonna adjust the PSI up to about 55. There you go, it runs. Sounds great too. All right, I'm gonna shut the motor off and get that regulator bolted back down. So, it's been about a week since I've installed the system, the Marty's e-fuel, in my truck. I've got about 150 miles on it, and there hasn't been a single hiccup. I'm super happy with it. Truck starts and runs every time, runs great, runs better than what it did, so very happy with it. I haven't had any issues. I mean, the only thing I ran into was that bad fuel pump, but Marty's made that right away. They sent me a brand new one. Got it a couple days later, as you guys saw in the video. I don't know if I'd mentioned it or not in the video that Marty's actually sent that out, even though they said they weren't going to warranty it. They sent it to me anyway. I mean, if you want to talk about like good business practice, I mean, that's something I can get behind, and I'm glad to give them my money for this system, now knowing how they treat their customers. I called there a couple times to speak with customer service about some issues, mainly being the pump, and they were more than helpful. It seems like it's a small, like family-owned business kind of thing. You can talk to the same person every time you call if you want to. That being said, I'm super happy, no issues. The truck runs great. I could not be happier, and there's no more fuel leaks. As you guys know, the 7.3 is super prone to fuel leaks. That's what was happening in my truck, and it's not happening anymore. So what more can I say? If you guys got any questions, make sure you leave a comment below and I'll do my best to answer it for you. Until the next video, hope you guys have a great day.